Alright, this is a pretty big model, but there's not a lot of colors on him, so he's actually going to go by pretty quickly. So I'm starting with some Stegadon scale green, which is I guess depending on who you ask, some people would say it's blue, some people would say it's green, but it's definitely right in between the two of those. And it makes for a really good base tone. If I could do again, which, I guess I could always just go back and do some more, but not for the recording, I guess. But I would also shade this. So this color is definitely dark for the color we're going to eventually end up with. But I do think it would have benefited from some shading, and you'll see that at the end that there isn't a lot of contrast between the highlights and the shadows. If you do not have an airbrush, don't worry about it, just base coat it. That's all I used the airbrush for, was to quickly base coat the entire model, the skin. I tried not to base coat any of, or the least amount of his bone structures. Using light turquoise here to now start highlighting the model. A dry brush probably would have worked better, but I was trying to make him a pretty high quality one, and dry brush obviously leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to a nice finish on it. I mixed Ivory into that light turquoise, and this was the final highlight for the skin. I'm showing you just really on the face and the hands here, but I did it for the entire body the whole way around, including his back and his legs, everything like that, as you can see now on his arms. But you can also see that there isn't a lot of contrast, and so I think I should have shaded him down, or maybe even put some true green in there to get some really deep low lights to complement those highlights. Using Khaki, we're going to cover all of the bone structures. That's his claws, his toenails, his teeth, and the bones that are sticking out of his back. Now there's some bone structures that I did not color, and that's because I wanted it to look like those were made of metal, as if he had grabbed pieces of metal off of the warriors that he killed and kind of slapped them on him. So you can see that there's a couple pieces of what look like bone that don't have the spikes on them, and I left those to be painted a little bit later. I'm using some Agrax Earthshade now to go and shade all of the bone. And I have the same feeling on this bone that I did for the skin, but in the opposite direction. I think I should have pushed the bone a little bit further with contrast in the highlight realm. I think the shadows are great. I think that they came out perfect, but I needed some more highlights. I'm using Khaki here to go and replace all of the flat areas with some Khaki color rather than the Agrax Earthshade. You can see the bone on the left hand side of the model, or as you're looking at it, your left hand side. Those are already done. I practiced on those to make sure that I could do the bones correctly. Now I have some Ivory, and this is where I should have pushed the Ivory a lot further, covered more of the bone in Ivory, and then went to a white to actually highlight the extremities. And I used the Ivory here to just sort of tip everything and to edge highlight all of the bone, and I shouldn't have done that. I think Ivory should have been a bigger piece of the main bone, and that white should have been used to do that. So if you're doing this model and you're following it the same way I'm doing it, that'll go a long way. While working with the white so that I could basically undo anything that I did wrong, I took some Biel-Tan green, watered it down quite a bit, and then I'm painting this into all of the shadows of the bone, and this is making there be a mossy mildewy look on all of the bone. I think that this actually came out really good, and you can go, if you keep the Biel-Tan green watered down, you can actually push pretty far with this without it getting too green. I'm taking black, and all of the spaces that were metallic I am now doing, that I'm going to make metallic, I'm base coating them in black, and we're pretty much halfway done with this giant model. There just aren't a lot of colors on him. He's a very simple model. It does take time, of course, but overall just a very easy process. taking steel here, and that's the color I'm starting with. It doesn't really matter what color you start with here if you want to do the same thing that I'm doing, whether you use a brass or a bronze or gold or silver or steel, because what we're going to do is really dinge it all up and make it really, really dingy. Now if you use a copper, you'll want to use a different color to dinge it up, and I'll explain in a second. Right now I'm using Nuln oil, and I'm painting the Nuln oil on all of the metal, being very careful not to get it on the skin or the bone. And then while the Nuln oil is drying, I'm going to move over to his loincloth, which I'm starting with a flat brown, covering the entire loincloth, front and back, and underneath his legs. Now I mix clear orange into the flat brown, so this is not clear orange by itself, we will get there. But on the color wheel, right across from blue is orange, and those are complementary colors, so when you put them next to each other, they look really, really good, and especially when you have brown separating the two of them, considering if you mix those two together, you would get brown. So having the brown in between as the low light and also kind of the break between the loincloth and the skin, that orange really, really looks nice. So now I'm doing pure clear orange here. So this is coming back, and I'm doing a little bit on the front loincloth as well, but you'll also see that the front loincloth is almost completely in shadow, and it's also really hard to see on the camera and try to paint at the same time. So I'm just showing you on the back, but you're doing the same on the front as well, but to a lesser degree each time. Now I put some ivory into that clear orange, and I'm just sort of picking out the very top highlights here, and I should have been pushing the skin to the same level of highlight. It would have looked much better. So this was the part where I was saying if you use a color other than steel, you're not going to want to use Ryza rust. Rust is anything that is steel, so if you have iron or steel or tin, then like a silver, I guess you could also use this to make it look like steel. If you use a gold, you'll want to use green to get like the verdigris, I think it's called. And if you use like brass or copper, then you definitely want to use like that bluish cake wash that is like I think it's verdigris is how you say it. Then here I'm dinging up the bottom of the steel and making it look all corroded with Typhus corrosion. And the way that you use this stuff is you paint it on, and it goes on too thick, instantly goes on too thick, and you can't water it down. So what you actually do is after you've painted it on, you come back with a clean brush that's just a little damp, and you feather it, and that's the way that you kind of thin it out. And so we have rust from the top down, we have steel kind of mixed into the middle there, and then you have corrosion from the bottom up. And that all together makes it look really nice. So here for the base, I'm putting in some umbral umber and some refractive green. I'm not mixing those together. So the reason I'm showing you them separately on here is because I painted some of it umbral umber, some of it refractive green. And then what I did is I set the model on the table, put a light directly above him, and then sketched out with black where the shadows are. And once I put down some of the material that I'm going to have in the basing, I wanted to create a swamp, and I'm using Vallejo's water texture here, and I'm making it incredibly thick. Now this did not work as well as I hoped it would. It sort of gets cloudy when it's this thick. I should have done it in smaller layers, maybe 2 layers, but you can see here how thick I have it, about a good 2 millimeters thick. I'm using some Carroburg crimson for the eye, and then Squid pink for the tongue here. And you could also wash the tongue with Carroburg crimson and then re-highlight with the Squid pink. That would probably look really good as well. I didn't focus too much on it because it's not really a main point. I kind of liked the bones as the main focal point, but here we are. Flat red going into the eyes, and then we're going to dot them with some pure white. And then the only thing left to do was to put some plants down into the water to really make it look like it's a swamp that he's standing on. and I think that he came out really awesome, which you'll see in a second with his base. But I do think that the skin is lacking. I think that I could have pushed the highlights for the skin a little bit further. Or sorry, the lowlights for the skin further and the highlights for the bone higher. But I think he came out really awesome and he looks great on the board. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know what model you would like to see painted next. Don't forget to like the video if you did like it, and definitely subscribe if you want to see some more Zombicide Green Horde models. And I'll see you all next time.
New outro, I know. If you want to watch more in this series, click right here. If you would like to watch another video in a completely different series, click right here. And if you'd like an easy way to subscribe, other than clicking down below, even though it's right there and it says subscribe, you can click on this little picture right here. That also works.